Welcome to HortTube. My name is John Putnam. This is the garden question and answer video that I do most Sundays. You guys can ask gardening questions down below in the comment section, and whatever your comment is your question. I pick from those each week. I try to pick ones that are relevant to whatever's going on in the world at that time, whether it be heat of the summer questions or whatever, or things I haven't answered in a long time that get asked repeatedly. And so I usually will take a break from some of them and then bring them back up again occasionally just because they're so frequently asked. Holly's out here wandering in the garden. I don't know if you can see her. Maybe she's probably just out of frame right there. Let's see. The Garden Plants with Jim Putnam channel, which is my other YouTube channel, had maybe as many as 5 videos go up this week. So if you have not subscribed to that channel, you can do so over there. And it's just individual plant videos, just descriptions of individual plants. There's lots more to come on there, and there's lots of other things that are going to build out of that as well in the future. The Learn to Garden video series, which you can purchase over on my website, HortTube.com, has a new video on attracting birds to your garden. Bird feeders right here, and we've got lots of plants in the garden for birds, and birds are doing a lot of work out here for us in the garden, so that's what that video is about. That series of videos is expanding weekly, and I'll be putting up content for another year and a half probably to fill it all the way out for all the videos that I have planned for it, and also written materials as well. And then let's see, I finally wrapped up this week the 9-tour video of this garden where every single plant in the garden was named. If you want to go back, if you haven't watched those videos, or I don't know, they're probably all 30 minutes on average a piece. So that's 4.5 hours of video content. And then there's an additional video on a more up-to-date tour, because when I did those 9 videos, things did not look like they look out here right now. Everything's just exploded since then. So that video went up as well. Okay, let's get to some questions from this past week. Somebody wants something like a golden Oakland holly, which is that holly that's poking up right over the top right there. You see that gold holly? They wanted to know if they could keep it around 10 feet in height. Yeah, sure. Those upright hollies like that, you can continue to shear them. You'd probably be better off if you were up for using some other type of holly to use, something like needlepoint holly. It's a green one, but it's not variegated like that golden Oakland is. But it'll probably get into that height range, or 10 to 15 feet, and kind of narrow, like this. It has a more upright habit than dwarf Burford does. So you'd probably be better off putting one in that gets the size that you want it to be, and not have to prune on it. But yes, I could easily keep that thing 10 feet for the next 20 years probably, with just a little bit of shearing on it a couple times a year. Okay, so somebody has mint, and they let it loose out into their garden and want to know how to get rid of it. Unfortunately, we have our mint in a container over here, and I move the container occasionally, make sure that stuff's not gonna ever get into the garden here, because it's super, super aggressive. Anybody that's had experience with mint in the garden will know. Now she's back here, and you won't be able to see her because she's behind the shrubs, maybe her shadow back over here. It's the same answer I would give to anything, to English ivy, to mint, to literally any invasive plant. Once it's gone wild, it's just an invasive. We can call it whatever you want to call it, but it's an invasive to you. You've got to just stay on top of it. You got to go out there and chop it off, dig it out, and keep staying on top of it, and keep staying on top of it. That's the answer to all of those questions, or you spray it. There's no other, those are the only 2 options. You dig it out and you stay on top of it, and you stay on top of it. You can, mint's probably one of those things you could cover for a while and not kill it, similar to Bermuda grass. It can probably survive under cover for a little while, but you could try to cover it for some period of time, the area, and see if that would help. So, but again, it's more about any of those invasive problems. You got to just stay on top of them, and you hope to just reduce it and reduce it and reduce it until one day you get to put a check mark on it that it's done. But unfortunately, I don't have a better answer to that. A lot of the answers are going to be like that today. just a foreshadowing of this Q&A is the answer. The answer is hard work or no coming up. Okay, so somebody asked if I use cover crops in the garden, and a lot of people do. Well, they'll plant some sort of winter wheat or winter rye or some sort of crop when they're going to turn over their vegetable garden season to season. They'll plant something in between. There are, things that we could use that might fix nitrogen in the soil, that kind of thing. Clover can do that, and so some other things that you could put in there to overwinter. I don't, but I always keep the soil covered. And so if I didn't have winter vegetables out in my garden, I'd probably take a lot of the leaves that fall off the oak tree that's above my head and cover the garden that way through the winter. I would definitely keep some sort of coat on top of it. It doesn't have to be a living plant to accomplish that. You can just use leaves or something, but I don't ever leave the soil bare regardless. So that's the key, is that you're building your soil, you're building all this soil life, and then you pull everything out and then leave the soil bare in the winter. It's going to set back that soil life. So I put some sort of organic material on it if you're not going to be growing something in it over winter, which normally I have my winter crops in it. I'm going to hear a little beeping, and they're repairing the roads out here all around the house, including our road, and it set back the house repairs. And I talked about the house repairs in a few videos recently. We've got all the exterior of this entire house is being replaced. It was supposed to start 2 days ago. As I'm filming this in the middle of the week. It's not starting now until August because they haven't done the roads because it rained a lot when they were supposed to start doing the roads. So anyway, it's behind, and we're going to hear some beeping probably. Somebody asked why I'm not in the nursery business anymore. So I started as, my company was called Earthworks, and I started out as a landscape company. I'm a North Carolina certified landscape contractor. I still am, and I'm scrambling actually in the last week or so because I forget. I need like 7 continuing education points that I get by going to things during the year. And I always forget to sign my name and get credit for the things that I go to. I go to plenty of things, and then here we are. It's July 31st is when I have to have my 7 credits, and I think I was sitting at 5. So I've scrambled and taken a couple classes that I could have probably taught and could have definitely taught, which is really kind of funny. And paid to take them. That was really kind of funny. And then to keep my license up. So I started out as a landscape contractor, and then I slowly evolved into the nursery business. And I had my nursery for about 20 years. I had a space at the Raleigh Farmers Market, had a space at the Greensboro Farmers Market for a while, and I had a retail place down in Johnston County, which is a little southeast of Raleigh, North Carolina, where I'm at. The short answer is a developer. Their houses sitting where my plants used to grow. I did buy 15 acres around the corner from that space, and I still own it. And the thought was that's where I was going to originally move. And then I got to that moment and thought, I've built a nursery before. I've kind of checked it off my list. I could do it better than I could have done it before, and I could do it for less money than I did before because I made a lot of mistakes, initially. But I haven't, I kind of put it in the rearview mirror, but I still have that land and I still have that option. My thing for that other nursery was going to be, I was just going to turn it into a place for propagation, maybe do some mail order specialty things. And I may do that at some point. I still have that property. And so that option is still available to me, and it's just outside of Raleigh, so it's in a good location. But the short answer is a developer came along, and now it's houses. I do miss, there's lots of parts of it I do miss, but I don't necessarily miss some of the late nights. I have a little bit of, honestly, I have a little bit of PTSD from severe weather. We were down in Louisiana and had about a 3.5-inch rain in probably 45 minutes to an hour, staying in South Louisiana right before we left to come back home. And I get really weird, when those kinds of events happen where there's really extreme weather. I had some disasters along the way with weather-related disasters in the nursery, and it just really, and anytime that stuff's going on, I'm thinking about other nurserymen and that kind of thing. So it's, those events aren't fun, and hurricanes aren't fun, and all those things. So I'm glad that part's gone, but I do miss the actual growing of plants. So I just talked a lot about that, didn't I? Okay, so somebody has their Golden Falls Redbud staked, and basically it's probably going to be similar to mine. We'll rotate around we'll rotate around there. Holly's over here eating grass. I probably need to put her inside. We'll come around here to my normal view. So the Golden Falls redbud back here, mine is pretty much permanently staked. That tree grows too fast. I mean, it grows just crazy fast. I filmed a video with Bryce Lane this week. You guys will probably have seen that video by the time this video goes up. That tree grows feet a year. I mean, just feet and feet and feet a year. I've already pruned it up from the bottom once. It needs to be pruned up again. I just keep limbing it up. They could run across the ground, but I just keep bringing it up and it goes right back to the ground. But the trunk on it's just not thick enough. It's going to have to remain for a long time staked. And so, if yours is staked, you're just going to need I would put a new heavier stake on it and just assume you're going to have to keep it on there for a while. Let's see, somebody asked about having an abelia in a container. This is an abelia, man, I'm getting lucky. All the plants are in the frame. This is a variegated abelia back here, Miss Lemon. They're terrible container plants. They don't root into containers very well. And if the roots get hot on them, it burns the roots back. Growers have a terrible time growing these variegated abelia. They're easy in the ground, really wicked easy in the ground. Tough ornamental plants. But nurserymen never produce enough of them because they have a difficult time finishing them. You can have this big, beautiful plant on the top of the container and then flip the container over and have almost no roots on it. That's bizarre how bad that plant is. It doesn't like heat on the roots. So yes, it's an okay container plant, but I would make sure the container's not just getting blasted with sun, because the roots just burn off on them. And it looks like you have this beautiful plant on the top, but it's not supported by much down below. So somebody asked from the dahlia video that I put up earlier this week, when you dig up dahlias, do I break them apart to store them? No, when you dig up your dahlias to store them, make sure all the tubers are firm, and then I would store them as a solid unit. And then if you want to divide them, you can divide them coming out in the spring. People do check on them a few times during the winter as well, or however you're storing them, and make sure that they're not rotting or something's going wrong or something's gotten into them or anything like that. You need to check on them a few times over the course of the winter and throw away any that are rotten or that can spread through all of your dahlias. But I would store them whole and then divide them before you put them in the ground if you want to do any dividing on them. So somebody asked for ornamental grasses that will take full sun in zone 7B. Doesn't really matter. The answer is going to be almost pretty much all ornamental grasses are for full sun. There's a lot of grass-like plants like the yellow carex that might be seen a bit back here that likes part shade. A lot of the carexes and a lot of grass-like plants will take more shade. Mondo grass and liriope, although liriope will take full sun as well. But there's a lot of grass-like plants that need shade or part shade, but almost all actual grasses really like to be in lots and lots of sun. They wanted some that would stay short, so I would think about something like a dwarf fountain grass like Hamlin, that stays pretty small. Those are good. Blue fescue, I mentioned a few weeks ago, a good choice. And then something like little blue stem, which is one of our natives. It's a small growing grass. But there's a lot of, pretty much anything that's an actual grass in the Poaceae, which is the grass family, which I think humans get about 50% of their calories or something close to that from the Poaceae, because corn, wheat, and rice are all in that plant family. Probably to human beings, the Poaceae or the grass family is the most important of all plant families. We wouldn't be able to feed 8 billion people without it, but pretty much all of those things in that family like the sun. Let's see, somebody asked when to prune clematis, and I'm going to say clematis clematis so I don't get corrected. The clematis pruning, most of them you can do lightly after they finish their big spring flowering or whenever they finish their flowering. There's multiple different groups. So there's three different main groups of clematis, some that die to the ground, some that stay, and come completely back from the ground, some that bloom on old wood. I mean, they're all different. It really would be best to know which one you had, and then you can Google and look up when to prune that particular one, because it's actually, the only thing I could tell you in a general sense is you can generally clean them up and reduce the size on them a bit after they finish blooming, and you'd probably be okay. That's pretty much true with every plant in the world. If you do a small amount of pruning on it after it blooms, you're probably okay. But there's probably, there may be a better answer for your particular clematis. So knowing the names of the ones that you're buying is kind of important, because they're grouped into different groups as to what flowering types they are. You know, I've got Henry Eye out in the front garden. It blooms pretty much all summer. Just as it grows, it blooms. As it grows, it blooms. And I've got others that flush out from the ground in the spring and bloom like mad. And then they're just kind of done for the season. And then there's evergreen clematis. So lots of different types. So it's hard to answer that question. Okay, how to get rid of cabbage moths? You can't. I mean, they're coming from other gardens. I mean, I have cabbage moths in this garden. What you need to do is protect your brassicas from them. So, Holly, what you doing back there? What you doing back there? I think you can maybe see her walk through here. What you doing back there? Huh? You're making a lot of noise back there. You really can't get rid of them, but I protect my brassicas. The brassica family is cabbages and kale and Brussels sprouts and I'm going to forget lots of things right this minute. Broccoli, cauliflower, all of those things are brassicas. They were all made from the same plant, believe it or not. A little cabbage that, you know, that native to Great Britain. Humans turned it into all those other things. They're all the same plant. Brussels sprouts and broccoli, same plant. Cabbage, same plant. It just looks different and were manipulated by humans over a long period of time. But those brassicas, those cabbage moths, you know, tear up the brassicas pretty badly. So what I do is when I convert the garden over to the fall garden, we'll put some sort of net or mesh over the top of them while the cabbage moths are still floating around. They're little white cabbage. They're little white moths that flutter around all over the place, but they're pretty destructive to brassicas, but you can't get rid of them. I mean, they're in your neighbor's yard. They're everywhere. And they're out here like any other pollinator doing their thing. They just happen to then lay their, you know, do their thing on your brassicas to, you know, create their caterpillars. Okay, so another answer with nothing. So somebody has a sunny area that stays moist at the bottom up there. So it's the bottom of a slope and then it stays moist and it's in the full sun. Fortunately, a lot of those water-loving plants, you know, if you look this up, if you were to Google this, I would say that 90% of what comes up on the list is going to be things that want shade or part shade. So having wet areas in the sun is probably somewhat limiting. But you can definitely use a button bush or cephalanthus. Cephalanthus would be a great choice. They're like little alien white flowers if you guys haven't seen them. They're just it's a great native plant. I love seeing them. We were down in South Alabama, and I missed this photo. I missed this photo by this much of an alligator swimming past the cephalanthus. I was taking a picture of the cephalanthus, and there comes an alligator swimming by, and I couldn't get my phone to get both of them in the same shot. But I was like, here's two natives together, and I didn't get the photo. But buttonbush is a good one. Swamp milkweed, Itea. Itea is another native plant that will take the full sun. It's actually, every time I see it in the wild, it's sitting in water. So that would be another one. Clethra, that's another one. Every single time I've ever seen Clethra out in the actual world, not in somebody's landscape, it was actually is sitting in water or growing next to the edge of wet spaces. So all of, you know, the buttonbush, the Itea, and the Clethra are all natives that would probably work for you. Somebody's got a crispy butterfly bush. They got them, pulled them out of the container. The soil was super, super dry. It was difficult to re-wet, so the soil had become hydrophobic, which can happen. When something gets super root bound, it can be really hard to re-wet the bark that's in these containers. Peat moss can become that way too, hydrophobic, where it just seems like water just runs through it, but it doesn't actually get wet, or it takes a long time. Those are kind of plants I might sit in a bucket of water for a few minutes and make sure that I'm re-wetting that material before I plant them. They're getting they got a little crispy from being that dry, and they've put on some growth, so a little bit of new growth. Should they go ahead and cut them or wait? I would wait. So that's the one time that, if something's already under stress, I don't like to add to the stress frequently. So let it put on some real growth, 6 or 8 inches, and then if you want to cut it, then you'll know it's doing okay, and then if you cut it, you can rest easy. But if it's not growing much, I might be concerned if it's already under stress, adding additional stress. Somebody bought a Cornus Florida, which is our native dogwood. It's in the afternoon sun. It's got some crispy leaves on it, but it's got some new growth on it. So they just planted it, and then of course it got a little crispy because it was converting itself from probably coming out of a shady space at the nursery, maybe out into the sun. As long as it's got some new growth, it's probably going to be okay. A lot of the dogwoods in this neighborhood are in a lot of sun that look pretty good. My neighbors, I got one right here beside the house across from me, and it's in a lot of sun, and does okay. Keep in mind that where dogwoods actually normally grow is on the edge of the woods, and so they have their roots protected, but they actually have the top of the trees out in the sun most of the time. So it's really the roots that you need to be concerned about. So make sure it's a mulched space. You can use some ground covers around it. You can, make sure that the area is staying moist, not wet, but moist. But somebody had recommended a Coosa dogwood instead of Cornus Florida, and that's probably a good recommendation. If this one ends up failing on you, you're probably better to go with a Coosa dogwood than our southeastern native dogwood, ultimately, for that particular afternoon sun spot. Somebody asked about extreme root-bound plants, how I deal with that. There's actually a video on the channel from way back at the old house about this. I had a crepe myrtle that was terribly root-bound. I actually saw the bottom of the roots off. I take about an inch, half an inch to an inch, and I literally saw the roots off the bottom just in a flat plane and take off that, it looks like a pizza, of roots. And then I saw through the side multiple times, top to bottom, and then I plant them. I don't do a lot of going in there and trying to, really pull them apart and stuff. But I just cut them and saw them to the bottom. If you're doing that kind of root damage, you may want to reduce the top just a bit to compensate for that. But that's the way I plant them. And again, there's a video on the channel for planting root-bound plants. You could search it, Jim Putnam, and root-bound plants probably on YouTube and find it. Let's see. And that was an extremely root-bound crepe myrtle I was planting. It was basically all roots. So somebody asked, the best advice to get a garden on autopilot. I don't know if this means like no maintenance, because there's not a lot of that. I mean, the only kind of no maintenance gardens are, planting little, industrial little balls like that Abelia, and then, in small spaces, or just having it be lawn that you mow, which is of course not autopilot. It requires a lot of maintenance, but if you have a lot of bed space, you're going to have some weeds, and so you're going to have. So I don't know if their question was just, related to I don't want to do anything in the garden, because unfortunately that's a difficult thing to answer. But if your question is more related to having it where you don't have to do a lot of fertilizing and that kind of thing, is really just, again, keeping the ground cover and improve the soil, and then let the soil take care of your plants. So all this was done with compost and wood chips, and the place looks pretty good because of it. So again, two different questions. If you're asking me for just kind of a no maintenance landscape, there's not really such a thing, but there probably are industrial, hollies and abelias and loropetalum and crepe myrtles and sunshine ligustrum, and a lot of things that you could probably plant that you wouldn't have to do a whole lot of work to, but you're still going to have to weed the beds. You're still going to have to mulch occasionally, and you're going to have to water if it gets crazy dry. So I don't really know what the question was, but in terms of if you want the best out of your garden, treat the soil and let the soil treat the plants is always going to be my answer. Somebody asked if toxic plants for dogs is a real thing. Yeah, definitely. There's definitely poisonous plants for humans and our pets. And really, for me, it comes down to, there's some people that are on the scale of, if it's even mildly toxic, they don't want it at all. They That's their mindset about it, and that's totally fine. I mean, not judging anyone how they think about it. I think you have to judge it. For me, I judge it based on, my dog doesn't chew on anything. Holly's over here exploring the garden, you know, looking at bees and staring at the world, and you know, we can, never mind, I won't turn the camera on you guys again, but she's just over here hanging out. She doesn't chew on any of the plants. She'll chew on a little bit of crabgrass or something like that occasionally, like dogs will, you know, on grasses, but nothing that's ever concerned me in any way, so I just don't think about it. The NC State website, if you look on their plant library, they actually have the plants, you know, a poison thing right up at the top under each of them. So like under oleander, which is a very poisonous plant, you know, they extreme caution, extreme poison, you know, high level of poison, and then they have them ranked, you know, in different colors and codes based on that. So a lot of the things that are mildly poisonous, the dog would have to eat a lot of. The dogs are much smarter than we think they are. They have a better sense of smell than we do. They're able to detect the defenses in some of these plants. You know, the Asclepius has, you know, it bleeds, you know, like a glue almost. The oleander does the same thing. Star jasmine, oh my gosh, break that thing open. It's like a glue that it's up on your hands, and nothing would eat it. I don't think a dog would eat more. I mean, if a dog tasted it, I think that'll be it. There will be no more going back to the star jasmine from there. So most of it, so yes, lots of these plants are toxic. Lots of the things around us in the world are toxic. But if you look up what causes the most hospitalizations for dogs from poisons, the plants are way down the list. Considering how many of these things are actually probably toxic, it's way down the list. It's mostly household chemicals, their prescription drugs, our prescription drugs, alcohol, grapes and chocolate and all the kind of foods that they're allergic, you know, so it's pretty freaking rare because the dogs are pretty good at it. But if you have a dog that chews all the time, I would definitely think about this list. Okay, so I think you have to judge it dog to dog. But some dogs will just go out and start chewing on plants all day long. And I know those dogs exist, and I've gotten plenty of comments about those types of dogs over the years. Definitely you should be concerned about it. My dog's just not. But there are, again, the NC State site I think is the best, but almost over the top on it, because they even list the mildly poisonous things, and like everything on earth is poisonous. It's the dosage that makes something poisonous. So the mildly poisonous ones, they'd have to eat an awful lot of them probably. One of the questions from last week was about somebody storing plants that they were going to take from their house that they were selling and store them and then take them to their new house. And somebody just commented, it's not legal to take plants from your home that you sell. That would be true, but you can dig up the plants before you list the house for sale. You know, you can take anything you want before you list it. It's just, but if you sell it or have an agreement with someone and then start digging the plants up out of the ground and you don't have an agreement with that new person, yes, that would in fact likely be problematic. But I took a bunch of plants out of a house in the neighborhood here from a friend, but it was before they listed it for sale. So the person buying it, you know, they saw what they were getting, right? So you do keep that in mind. Make sure that if you're going to be taking plants with you, you're getting them out of the ground before you list it, or you have some agreement in place with the new owner that you're going to be taking some things. So somebody asked how to treat spider mites without spraying. There's really no way to treat spider mites probably without spraying. What I've talked about with spider mites in the past is something is wrong with that plant that's allowing the spider mites to attack it. So it could be a house plant that you don't have in enough light. It could be something that you're forcing into southern areas. Dwarf Alberta spruce is a great example of this. Dwarf Alberta spruce is, you know, really not hardy down here in the southeast. They're sold like crazy at all the stores, and people buy them, and then they inevitably are going to get spider mites at some point because the plant's just stressed from the heat. And the spider mites come along, see that it's stressed. It's a vulnerable plant. The spider mites take advantage of that. So ask yourself, am I keeping something too wet, too dry, too much shade, too much sun, in a house where it's not getting any air, it's not getting air movement? It's something in the placement of that plant, or it's just not a plant that literally wants to be in the area that you have it in. It's just under some sort of heat-related stress, cold-related stress, whatever it is. But usually that's going to be the issues with spider mites. In terms of whether to spray or not, I've always been a proponent. I sprayed for spider mites and controlled spider mites at a nursery for 20 years. And it was just annoying. Part of the reason we had spider mites in the nursery was because we over-fertilized everything. We were trying to push it, get it finished, get it out for sale. The more you pushed it, the more you stressed it, the more vulnerable they were to spider mites. And then there's also the plants that have been introduced that are just genetically inferior. So I had a couple yellow butterfly bushes I tried over the years, and the yellow butterfly bushes would have spider mites on them almost immediately. All the other butterfly bushes we had in the nursery, some would get them sometimes, some would get them other times, but the yellow ones, every time, 100% of the time. And I just came to realize this is a genetically inferior cultivar that I was growing, and so that can be one of the things as well. For me, spider mites come along, that plant's probably out of my life. I'm going to make an attempt to put it in another place and make it happy, but it's probably ultimately out of my life. Okay. So somebody has a Eugenia that was burned. They're in Vegas. Eugenia is like a tropical boxwood. If you've seen, they'll sell these, as tropicals in the spring and in the summer at the box stores and at garden centers, and then you can bring them in the winter if you want to try to keep them. But people will turn them into topiaries and little box forms. This one got burned. They're in Vegas, and maybe it was underwatered or something. One side of it got burned. Should they prune it now or wait? I would wait for a little new growth to show itself. And once it's happy again and it's growing again, I'd give it a little light haircut. Not a crazy haircut, but a little light haircut just to slow parts of it down to let that little patch fill back in to catch back up. So a couple prunings to slow the other part down while that fills back in should do the trick. Somebody asked about how to get rid of slime mold. Slime molds are super interesting. I've talked about them in the past. It's actually it's its own type of thing. It's not like a fungus. It's not like a bacteria. It's not a plant. It's its own. Slime molds are their own things, and there's lots of them. They look like, some people call them dog vomit. They'll just appear overnight, and it looks like a dog vomited in your mulch. They're not doing your plants any harm. They're not doing any harm to anything. It's typically in moist summers where you're going to see it the worst. And so if you're having an abnormally wet period of time during summer, you're more likely to see the slime molds. Keep in mind the slime molds breaking down your mulch. Those nutrients are going to end up available for your plants. So it's not hurting anything. It is speeding up the breakdown of your mulch, and your plants are going to benefit from that ultimately. So it's not that big of a deal. I understand it looks repulsive. It goes from this bright kind of lime green color or yellow color or orangey color to brown, and then you'll see the spores fly out in the air. We're probably breathing those spores nonstop. They're everywhere in the air around us probably. There's no really way to stop it. If you're using organic mulches, you're probably going to see slime mold at some point. And again, it's probably related to the weather you're currently having, and other years you're probably just not going to see it. I've seen it once here in this garden since I've been here. Saw it many times at the old house. And I did nothing. That's what I did. No big deal. Your garden is part of nature. That's the way I should answer all of those questions, and congratulations. Let's see. So last question for this week. So somebody was just in general asking if on a gentle slope, do I use all just ground covers, or would I look to put all kinds of things on that? Yes, I would. No matter what it was, I would look to put perennials, flowering perennials and woody shrubs and small growing trees and all kinds of things on a slight slope. You may end up having to water it just a little bit more, but you want as many things rooting into that space as possible, and hopefully holding your soil in place and mulch in place and other things in place. But I would definitely use a mix of ground cover and then a perennial layer and then shrub layer, and just like I would anywhere else. But keep in mind, you may initially have to water it just a bit more because the drainage is going to be a little bit different. But I don't treat that kind of thing any differently. If you got to extreme slope, we'd probably have a different conversation about building some sort of retaining wall or using all ground covers at that point. But other than that, I'm going to treat it like any other space if it's a gentle slope. So there you go. The little membership thing that's down below most of the videos, I don't know if it always shows up underneath. It says become a member or something like that below one of my videos or on my channel page. I have no idea. where it is. I think there's like 70 members of the channel. I do a once, I mean to do a once a month Zoom meeting. If you are a member of the channel, expect to get a notification in the next week or so that there's going to be a member Zoom meeting coming up. So, and it doesn't matter what level of membership you are on there. I think it's $1.99 to whatever. You'll be part of that invitation. And lastly, I'm filming this on Wednesday because by the time you see this, I will have been at Cultivate. I'm speaking a couple times at Cultivate in Columbus, Ohio, and then I'll be back down here working in the garden. Thanks for following along.